Welcome into a fresh episode of the College Football Insiders. I'm your host, Richard Johnson. I'm joined by my guys, John Talty, Chris Hummer, and Matt Zenitz. Fellas, let's get into the news of the day to set the table for the week in college football. First, we'll start at the University of North Carolina. Perhaps you've heard Bill Belichick is the head coach there. They're not doing too good on the field. Lost 38-10 against Clemson at home on Saturday afternoon. It appears now that, according to reports, 2 documentary projects have been scuttled, canceled, whatever you want to say it, within the program. It's my understanding that up until a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, there were camera crews and documentary crews in the building to do the Hulu and North Carolina documentary inside the Tar Heels football program. Well, it appears, according to reports, that is no longer taking place. John, you've gone inside this UNC program over the last few months. What's going on here is probably too big a question because there's a lot going on here, but what's going on here?
Okay, can I just draw kudos to John real quick? So first of all, look at the presentation, like the mic. I'm jealous. Like I need to step my game up now. I don't know if you guys saw the build up to John's sneeze just now, but I was like bracing myself with that microphone being as big as it is for just like an explosion of sound. And I'm impressed that John was able to multitask that even during the build up to that sneeze, was able to hit the mute button because I was bracing for it.
I appreciate the support there. I was worried about it as well. But hey, I'm a pro here. I make sure I mute. I've gotten yelled at enough by producer Aaron for typing while on this podcast. So I'm trying to get better about it. I mean, honestly, I feel like we could have just a weekly UNC corner on this show because every week they do something else that's stupid or there's some other embarrassing thing that happens at Chapel Hill. I don't know where it stops, to be honest. It feels like it's getting worse and worse. You go back, more than a week ago, Bill Belichick's getting spotted, enjoying a nice weekend of his girlfriend in Nantucket. Hey, I love Nantucket. Went as a kid, had a great time. It's not as great when you're coming off a terrible loss to UCF. All of that from an optics standpoint gets amplified. And I think that's really what a lot of this is that the optics of everything happening in Chapel Hill are terrible. And when you add that with the fact that it's been a disaster on the field, it's a disaster off the field, you have to wonder how much, regret there is. And I go back to, we've, I think, talked about it in the show. I know a lot of us heard about it at the time. We wrote about it. Like, this is not what athletic director Bubba Cunningham wanted. He wanted to go younger. He wanted to, bring someone in like a John Summerall type to, reinvigorate a program that had slipped a little bit in Mac Brown's final years. And here he is having to just endure what's been the biggest public relations disaster in college football this season.
Yeah, but John, what I think is particularly interesting about this is a couple things. First of all, Mac Brown could do better than this. Mac Brown did do better than this, albeit with a different roster because much of that roster left when Bill got on. And obviously this is where we'll touch on the manifesto, so to speak, that the GM Lombardi put out late last week to high-level UNC donors. It's long. I'm not going to read it off here, but paraphrasing some excerpts where he talked about his past rooting for the Philadelphia 76ers and how the Sam Hinkie model of tanking to win was not what they were doing. He said that he wasn't going to blame the previous regime in North Carolina for the talent that they inherited, but then proceeded.
Wait, Richard, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. He said in the letter that he wasn't doing the Sam Hinkie model of tanking in college football where tanking does not exist.
Yes. Yes,
that's fantastic.
John has also read the letter. I'm not kidding.
I have. Yeah,
he literally wrote that in the letter. It's way too long for us to put on the screen here. It's too long to fit in a text, but it's just really, really long. The other thing he said that they're going to take 40 freshmen, or they're going to attempt to take 40 freshmen, and he's going to make sure that those freshmen that they're in competition with Big Ten and SEC schools, and he's going to make sure that they're going to flip players from Big Ten and SEC schools so that they can stock this roster. It was filled with some nods to Nick Saban's loss to Louisiana Monroe in his year one, and Bill Walsh's lessons of coaching. It was all over the place. But
I love Zenitz's face right now, just like
it's all over the place. Chris, I think the question that I'll pose to you is like, how do you even start to dig out of this hole from a roster perspective from them, because at the end of the day, they've maybe got like 2 guys who can play. I mean, the corner that they have is actually pretty good, I think. And then I don't know what you do.
Those 2 players they have came over with Steve from Washington. That says a lot about the evaluations this offseason in the portal. Sorry,
I'll let Chris go, but the obvious way that you dig yourself out is by having a good strategy and approach from a social media standpoint in terms of your team Twitter account.
Zenit's got jokes today.
He really does. He's really on a heater today. The other thing about UNC that, yes, we should also note is that our Ross Martin was in the process of reporting that apparently a directive from the UNC football staff, Bill Belichick, guess who, had come down to say that we're not going to tweet anything about Patriots players. You know, many programs tweet the highlights of their former players in the NFL. It's certainly a common practice. UNC actually does it with their other players, but up until 8 hours after Drake May had the massive win over the Buffalo Bills on Sunday night, the UNC Twitter account did not post it. Well, as Ross and our editors were working on their story after Ross tweeted about this, well, guess what UNC's Twitter account posted? But a highlight of Drake May. Again, 8 hours, 8 some odd, I think 9 hours actually, after the game was over. So yeah, a lot going on with North Carolina. I think when we get around to it this December and we start talking about what they're going to do in the portal, what they're going to do in high school recruiting, like what my question to you is, Matt, as somebody who talks to a bunch of these staffs, is like, how do how do players, I should say prospects, think about what they're seeing on the field? Because what we're seeing on the field is it's a team that can't play. It's a team that, in my opinion, is not just talent deficient. There's some like mental lapses and some things they don't look like ready to go.
I'll say a few things with this. First of all, regardless of how good of a coach you are, year one is always going to be a process. So you brought up Nick Saban. Nick Saban is Nick Saban and was 7-6 or whatever it was year one at Alabama. There are a number of Hall of Fame caliber coaches, some of the best coaches that we've ever seen at the college professional level that have ended up having a great deal of success that struggled in year one. Again, year one is always going to be a process. The problem with this is that there are just so many, and I'm trying to think of a word besides embarrassing, but just so many ridiculous things going on behind the scenes to go along with the product on the field not being great, that it's just, frankly, right now, hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And look, there are respected people on this staff, both from a coaching standpoint and from a front office standpoint, working on the personnel side, to where those people have had success before at previous places. And there's some young pieces, including from recruiting standpoint, that you can look to that, like, if can hold on to certain guys from a recruiting standpoint, maybe it leads to step forward. But Chris and I talked during the offseason about just, I mean, this is going back a while ago at this point, but when Bill Belichick was first hired, it was important. It was extremely important to capitalize on that early buzz and to have all of that early attention that was on Belichick in North Carolina and turn that into being able to get some recruiting wins, and not only high school wise, but also being able to land some players from the portal that could make an immediate impact year one. And it's fair to question, it was fair to question then, it's definitely fair to question now, just how much they were actually able to take advantage of that, and them not being able to do so to the level that should have, or we would have thought that would have been able to be the case, has contributed to them being in a position now where the product on the field is what it is.
And not all that was their fault. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say 2 quick things. One, like, this is a coach who legendarily hates distractions, and the way he's put this staff, his off-field situation and everything else together is distraction after distraction after distraction. That's, in my opinion, one of the first problems. Like, none of this would matter if they were winning, but it's hard to win in your first year. It's hard to win when you turn it over. The distractions are the part that's preventable, and that just keeps happening. Secondly, like, the evaluations just haven't been there. Like, this is a staff that in a lot of cases was recruiting against lower level P4 schools in the portal and recruiting and outbidding G5 teams to get their players. And like, they put together a roster that just wasn't ready to compete in the ACC. That's the reality of it. And now they're going a different direction with a 73-year-old head coach and signing almost 40 high school prospects. Like, I don't know if that's the long-term solution for UNC, especially for a coach who probably isn't going to be there long-term anyway.
And that's the other thing. I think that, like, at the end of the day, you mentioned 73 years old. 4 years in, he's going to be doing this when those guys are 77, or when he's 77. They may feel 77 because of all this is going on. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think some of that, wasn't necessarily Belichick and his staff's fault. They were hired late in the game. Obviously, the signing period already started. Transfer portal had already started. But there are multiple self-inflicted issues where they were slow to put together the staff. If you remember, like, Belichick took a very long time to put together his staff. That was wasted opportunity to be out there and getting guys. And I think, Lombardi has admitted that they did not understand the transfer portal period in the window the way they should have. But to me, that's another self-inflicted wound. If you want to make Lombardi, who is a GM at the NFL level, your top guy, I get it. But he needed to be surrounded by more college people, in my opinion. And I think the thing that you heard all offseason that to me has proven true to this point, which you talk to different college head coaches, GMs, whatever, they all talk about this arrogance that, was coming out of Chapel Hill, that we know better than you guys do. We did things at the NFL level. We had success there. Like, we're going to come in and just run this thing. And what you heard over and over again was that college is still very different than the NFL. There are some similarities. There's, new things that have popped up from a roster cap standpoint, contracts that maybe they are better equipped to than some of these college people. But college people have relationships. They know the talent better. And you have seen that play out with how this roster is put together and what we've seen in the on-field perspective so far.
To John's point about the arrogance, and this is something John has mentioned before on the show, like, there was arrogance towards agents and players, like with their offers. They were lowballing guys left, especially early in the cycle. It changed in the spring, but like during the winter when they were trying to get their feet established and start to really build off that momentum, they were lowballing guys left and right in the portal. And that's why they didn't get a lot of the guys they targeted. Like, they thought there would be a Bill Belichick discount. And in this world of college football where, like, the tiebreaker usually, or at least often, goes to the team offering the most dollars, like, that's just not the reality. Like, Bill Belichick's name doesn't, at least it seems like it doesn't carry the same weight as even like a Deion Sanders. Like, you just look at television ratings and it doesn't carry the same weight as a Deion Sanders. So I do think arrogance is a key word to think about with this staff.
I don't know about that part as much as, like, Deion has charisma. He's personable. If, like, even aside from interacting with him in person, you put him on the phone with a recruit, a parent, Deion has a way of making an impression during the course of that conversation that I just don't see the conversation going the same way with Bill Belichick. But it's also funny just to play the what-if game a little bit. So I know you talked about some of the stuff in terms of their approach with adding players going back to when they first got there. You do remember who they were aggressive with going back to, like, the early stages of all of this, don't you? John Mateer. Yeah. So they were aggressive with that. And it's just funny thinking back to, like, it was Oklahoma, Miami, and then North Carolina is like the quiet one behind the scenes. But I remember one of the things that Oklahoma said to Mateer during the course of that process was essentially just questioning the supporting cast that was there in North Carolina and asking him along the lines of, like, do you really feel like going into that situation and being a 500 at best quarterback? But I mean, North Carolina was aggressive with him. They put him on the phone with Tom Brady, if I remember correctly, Gronk, even like the Bailey Zappies of the world. Like, they pulled out all the stops, including it sounds like being willing to go to a high level financially to try to get him there. And who knows how different the outlook is if John Mateer is in Chapel Hill right now as opposed to what they have. But it's interesting just playing that what if game, just knowing what John has ultimately gone on to do at Oklahoma this season. Even though I will add that Gio Lopez is better than what he's looked like through the early part of the year. So as a quarterback, you're dependent on the pieces around you to perform at level and have the kind of success that hope to have. And there are just some deficiencies in terms of that supporting cast that lead to, whether it's Gio or even Max Johnson this past weekend, looking worse than what they really are.
Yeah, I think the offensive architecture that puts Gio Lopez, for instance, his back to the defense, theoretically, like it's stuff like that you're like, what are we doing here? But in any event, you brought up Deion Sanders, so let's go there as well. That's more news of the day in college football. Deion Sanders had a medical procedure today. This is his quote. Prayerfully, I'll be back at practice tomorrow, Wednesday. It is what it is what it is. Found what we found. He didn't really elaborate on what they found or what it was, but it was a leg procedure. I have a wonderful team of doctors at University of Colorado Health and a team of wonderful trainers here. It has nothing to do with me working at the level and competing. It is hereditary. It is what it is. I trust God with all my heart. So Deion Sanders has had another medical procedure, and this is something that obviously has been going on with him basically since he got to Colorado in different ways. There's the toe amputation. There's the bladder cancer that it seems like he beat earlier this year. And now sort of the lower extremity issues are coming back for him. So overall, this paints a picture that it's something that when you talk to people in the industry are very openly wondering if he's going to step aside at the end of the season. I think it's fair to wonder if at the end of the day, just for his health, like I'm not even talking about like for football reasons, for his health, perhaps he will decide to step away at the end of the season. There were some people who thought it was going to happen when he announced the bladder cancer earlier in the fall. But here we are, Matt, again with Deion, thankfully beating another health issue, it seems like, or at least having a procedure that we expect to go well. And he's in a position again where we're bringing up his health, and that I think is going to have an effect on their recruiting efforts in the future of the program.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of people around the industry, as you referenced, that are questioning whether it's this offseason or just probably the better way of putting it, just moving forward, how long Deion is going to be there at Colorado, especially just with some of the stuff that he's had to deal with from a health standpoint. I don't have a great answer on that. I couldn't tell you just whether that's going to be a consideration this offseason at some point in the next couple of years, but you are 100% on point that there's speculation around the industry, which isn't surprising whatsoever, just whether at some point in these coming years, Deion could step away with the health part of it being a factor in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's just the reality of it. It's an open question mark hanging over Colorado. And I mean, Deion Sanders is already going to have a large microscope on him. He is the most famous person in college football, in my opinion. Now that Nick Saban is retired, he might not be as successful as Nick Saban, but like he has that spotlight on him. Well, I mean, when you consider his like record as a player, like Deion Sanders is a pretty successful man in his own right.
Of course,
and both are Aflac pitchmen. So like, if you want to just like judge their Aflac acting careers, like I think Deion is probably slightly ahead of Nick in that regard.
I would agree with you there.
Yeah, thanks. But apples to oranges, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's something that's always going to hang over Colorado. I think even if Deion Sanders wasn't having the health issues, or even if Colorado wasn't 2-4, people would wonder, and recruits are going to wonder, like, how long is he going to stay? Like, now that his two sons aren't part of the program anymore, obviously his oldest son plays a really large role there. So that's something he was going to have to combat no matter what. But I agree with both of y'all. Like, it's an open question among industry sources, agents, people in search firms, athletic directors, like what's going to happen next with Deion Sanders. But in reality, like one person knows that. Like Deion Sanders is his own CEO, his own boss. Like he is going to decide when it makes sense to step away for him. And it just means like Colorado every week is going to have like a little question mark near it. Cause I wonder every week, just like how much longer Deion Sanders is going to be willing to do this.
Well, the other thing is they're not playing very well at all. And, you know, in the post-game press conference on Saturday night after they lost to TCU, like you can tell he's really searching, as any coach would in this position, searching for the answers to why they're not playing well. It seems like it's something that he and they can't quite put a finger on as far as why they're not able to finish games. They're up 14-0 on TCU. And TCU storms back and then is able to put them away. And so, John, I think Deion is just in an interesting spot when we get to on the field about how good this Colorado team is and how he tries to get them to a successful point.
Okay, can I throw in one thing real quick? Not to step on John's toes or interrupt, but one thing that's different than the North Carolina situation is you have some young pieces there, including at the quarterback position, at receiver. You can pick out some other spots also where you can see a light at the end of the tunnel at Colorado. And this is something that is worth just keeping in mind when it comes to Colorado. And also just in terms of the Belichick part of it, where people are naturally going to speculate, could he walk away after this year just with as poorly as things are going? Hey, as somebody that I respect a lot in the industry who brought up, regardless whether somebody has a significant financial backing or not, regardless how much money somebody has in their bank account, which I'm sure Bill and Deion are not struggling whatsoever in terms of what they have in their individual accounts, it's hard to walk away from somewhere around 8 figures a year. And Deion's at a point where, hey, he's making what, guys? $10 million this season, making $10 million.
Highest paid coach in the Big 12. Yep.
Belichick making somewhere around that also. Even with some of the stuff that we referenced, and regardless how much money these guys have put away already, that is difficult to walk away from. And with Colorado, it definitely is worth just keeping in mind that with Juju Lewis, some of these other young pieces they have, you can at least see that light at the end of the tunnel for Colorado.
Yeah, and I think the coaching talent is pretty strong at Colorado too. I think what's be interesting to see how Colorado handles it. I think Chris hit on it a little bit earlier. Like Deion and Colorado are so unique in general in how they recruit. If this was any other program, I feel like it would be hanging over everything of like, how do you recruit knowing that he might leave at any moment? But I feel like that's been the reality for a couple of years now as it is. And he, recruits so uniquely in terms of not really traveling as it is that they might be able to withstand some of these rumors around the industry better than the average program. But I wonder, and this is just pure speculation, I don't have any informed analysis. This goes against probably the entire concept of this show about being inside information. But I do wonder, knowing what Deion brings to that university, if at some point, if he feels like he cannot be dedicating full time to being a head coach, do you make him an ambassador? Do you use him in some other way, to Matt's point, allow him to keep some of that money that he is making so that he still gets to make money, and that maybe there's someone who can have a more hands-on role? Again, I don't have any inside information on that, but it's just something that he means so much, that university. We've written about the boom to applications and things like that. You'd love to have him involved in some capacity. And if his health does not allow him to be able to do that, is there a way for you to find something to do with it? That's just pure speculation. No inside analysis there.
GM Deion Sanders, John?
I mean, yeah, it would make sense. And again, I think if you put a side by side, they're about as different as possible. But as we're talking about this, I think about Jerry Kill and how tremendous of a coach he is. And clearly his health has just not allowed him to withstand the rigors of being a head coach. But the guy loves football. He wants to be around in some capacity. He's been great at Vanderbilt in terms of what they've done there. So again, if Deion's health does not allow him to be a full-time head coach, can you use him in some other capacity? GM, special assistant to the head coach, university ambassador, whatever it is. Like, there might be some way to keep things going where he still has an impact on the program.
Well, I think you just convinced Chris, who is a huge Matthew McConaughey fan, that the Deion should be the new minister of culture at Colorado. I could just see Chris being intrigued by that possibility.
He might just be minister, full stop, no culture.
Let's be clear, by the way, like a lot people question whether Deion will continue. There are also some people that say Deion will continue and he's too competitive to step away. Like, this is a class like in 2026 that ranks 69th nationally, but they recruit smaller than everybody else. There are several like very key pieces in that group. I'm thinking about like a 4-star recruit like Emmanuel Ruffin, who Colorado beat out a lot of top tier teams for. But like, Colorado has the flexibility to have this open question over them because Deion recruits out of the transfer portal every year. And like, Deion's always going to recruit well in the transfer portal. So they have a little more flexibility there. I don't know if they're going to turn him into like a Ralphie 2 or anything in the future, but I can think of some, like Vince Young was getting paid $500,000 for Texas for being Vince Young for a while there. Like there are situations where stuff like that happens, but
Nick Saban's still making $500,000 to be an Alabama ambassador.
Yeah.
It's good work if you can get it. I tell you that right now. Good.
The most important thing, I'll leave it at this. Chris mentions the portal part of it and just the work that they continue to do in the portal. As long as they retain some of their current key players in terms of the portal component and avoid losing them, whether it's Juju, Jordan Seaton, Draylon Miller, different guys that are building blocks for them for moving forward, this team does have the capability to take a step forward next year under Deion. And you've already seen some flashes this year where maybe the games have resulted in losses, but you've also seen the capability to win and then being at a competitive level even during a rebuilding type year.
When we come back on the College Football Insiders, we're going to do some whip around of the latest intel and injuries we're tracking this week on the show.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the College Football Insiders. If you're listening to this show on a podcast platforms, don't forget to subscribe. Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. And on YouTube, do not hesitate to hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications whenever we post a show on the College Football Insiders feed. All right, fellas, latest intel and injuries. Let's start with the big one of the week, quarterback John Mateer. Oklahoma didn't exactly have a bye week last week, but they played Kent State, so it basically was. The question around this OU program this week heading into the Red River rivalry, got to say that one slow, against Texas is, will he or won't he, John Mateer, play? Brent Venables said after the game on Saturday that he didn't think that he was going to play. I've heard both sides of it. Matt Zenitz, you're wired into OU's program. What are you hearing about John Mateer and the status of his hand injury after the surgery?
He had surgery 2 weeks ago. The feedback was so positive coming out of surgery that even though, like, going into that, the timeline seemed to be, or the belief was that it would be around a month until he would be able to get back, that the feedback was so positive coming out of surgery that it led to people around that situation feeling like there was at least an outside chance that he could be back for this game. And I will say that the goal, the hope for John Mateer all along, even outside of what he's been telling people at Chipotle, has been to be back for this game. It's still too early to tell whether that is going to be realistic or not. But I will say, even aside from John Mateer wanting this to happen, he has continued to progress and advance and do some stuff behind the scenes that at least have this at a point where it's at the very least a possibility.
What, Chris, can Oklahoma beat Texas without John Mateer?
Yeah. Did you watch Saturday?
I sure did. Don't you worry. I sure did watch Texas last
night. I know you. Well, I mean, I think this is it's interesting, right? Like, I think 3 weeks ago we thought this would be a matchup of unbeaten teams and two of the most interesting teams in college football. Then John Mateer got hurt, and then Texas came out and, especially on offense, looked horrendous against Florida. So it's taken some of the shine off this game. But Michael Hawkins has played a lot of football early in his career so far, and given the way Texas's offense has looked and Oklahoma's defense has been all year, like, yeah, I mean, Oklahoma can certainly win the game without him, but John Mateer is, as we saw earlier in the year, like 80% of Oklahoma's offense. Like, that offense runs through John Mateer, and him coming back is absolutely critical. I bet if he was healthy, Texas wouldn't be favored going into this game. I can promise you that. And, like, I think he is a guy that swings that line like 3 or 4 points, like, frankly, and that's why you see Texas favored right now. But yeah, Oklahoma can absolutely win without John Mateer.
Well, I think that's an interesting point too.
Mayfield. That's what he is. Like, that's what people internally view him as being, is Baker 2.0.
Well, too, I was just going to make a quick point to what Chris is saying. It's interesting the Vegas line has not shifted, right? And like we're hearing all this stuff, it feels like, I'll leave it to Matt on material analysis. But I do agree with Chris. I think it shifts at 3-4 points, probably 3. And the fact that it hasn't moved yet, I just think interesting. It just shows that Vegas is a little skeptical despite what feels like some building optimism from people in and around that program.
Or is it still confidence in Texas as far as Vegas? Because guess what? Like, yes, they lost to Florida, but as you guys know, Florida is in typical 1-3 team. They were playing good ball defensively, and a large part of the reason that they were 1-3 is that the offense was not performing at the level that we all expected them to be at heading into the year, including most notably at the quarterback position. And then guess what? Against Texas, you see DJ Lagway go out there, have his best game of the year, start to look more like the DJ Lagway that we expected to see heading into the season, continue to do some good things to go along with that, get Dallas Wilson out there for the first time this year at receiver, showed what he's capable of and why they were so excited about him during the offseason. So, yes, Texas lost to Florida, but I think that was more of like reason for optimism with Florida, regardless of the 1-3 record, more than it is a reason to think that Texas is just some terrible team now.
Well, terrible is such a strong descriptor. I don't think we're saying they're terrible, but I think there are real concerns.
So Arch does need to step up, and they need Arch to play at a higher level. I will add that in. But if they can get Arch playing like everyone expected Arch to play like heading into the year, like he's still capable of, Texas has done enough good things aside from just issues at the quarterback position that, like, if they can get Arch to that point, that's still a dangerous team for moving forward.
Chris, you want to take the floor here?
Yeah, I don't want to. Can we were going to talk about Texas later.
Yeah, we'll go Texas specific inside the insiders on our.
That was my fault. I shifted to go down a different rabbit hole.
We might get a crossfire moment here between the Arch debate between Zenitz and Hummer. I'm excited for later.
Wait, we're saving that for later. We're gonna stick whipping around on some injuries. Iowa quarterback Mark Gronowski. Now, Iowa's offense is not as good as I expected it to be coming into this season. Part of the reason is because Gronowski has not given them all of what they need. Gronowski got hurt in the Indiana game. Kirk Ferentz said this week a so far so good situation. So we will see if Gronowski actually ends up going in this game as well. The other thing to consider is also Connor Wegman, also in the state of Texas. Willie Fritz said Connor Wegman right now is in concussion protocol, but he's doing pretty darn well in his press conference. And then, Chris, Oklahoma State. I guess we're around and around on the quarterback carousel we go with the Pokes. Sam Jackson, the fifth, now getting a go here at Oklahoma State potentially this weekend.
Yeah, Sam Jackson, the fifth, on his fourth team, potentially going to start at quarterback for Oklahoma State. I don't think that's decided yet, but I've talked to a couple people around that program today that think Sam Jackson has a legitimate chance to start for them, which is notable given that he began the year as a wide receiver. And Sam Jackson has had a really interesting path in college. He started at TCU, transferred to Cal, producer Aaron's favorite Cal quarterback in recent memory, had a very short stint there, transferred to Auburn, became a wide receiver, transferred again this offseason to Oklahoma State, closer to home in Texas, started the year as a receiver for them, and has been essentially thrust into emergency quarterback duty for Oklahoma State. There's a chance freshman Banks Bowen also starts on Saturday. I think they're still determining what exactly is going to happen. But I would not be surprised at all if Sam Jackson got the first snap on Saturday for Oklahoma State, which frankly says everything you need to know about how Oklahoma State's year is going. This is a team that didn't really have a third quarterback going into the season. And like everything else, it's gone wrong for them.
I will say there are some names in this Oklahoma State quarterback room. You got a Hoss Haney, Sam Jackson, the fifth, Banks Bowen. There are some names in that room. Mississippi State to round us out here. Matt, Fluff Bothwell, the transfer running back in from South Alabama, looked like he had a pretty gruesome injury. He was carted off of the field against Texas A&M at Kyle Field on Saturday night, was in tears sitting on the cart. You could see it. What have you gotten on the significance of that injury?
So it heard going back to Sunday that there was optimism that it was not as bad as what it looked like on Saturday. Continued to hear that yesterday, even though they were waiting for the results of additional testing. And I know Jeff Levy touched on it a little bit today, but can add on to that a little bit that it is not considered a season-ending injury. They don't have a firm timetable as of yet, but he's been a key piece of their 4-2 start. Has run for around 500 yards or whatever it is through the early part of the year. And it's a situation that fortunately did not end up being as bad as what that looked like on Saturday, because that did not look good on Saturday when that happened. Also, just to quickly piggyback off what you said about Mark Gronowski. So we reported on that the other day, that there was a lot of unknown about Mark Gronowski, not only for us, but even people around Mark Gronowski, people around the Iowa program, just in terms of timetable there and what was going on. That at this point, as we reported the other day, is not considered a long-term injury. It's a true day-to-day, week-to-week type deal. However, want to sum that up. And then one additional injury-related note. So we touched on the Oklahoma-Texas matchup with John Mateer. Something from Texas standpoint worth keeping an eye on. Starting corner for them, Malik Muhammad, missed this past weekend against Florida. There is some optimism there. It seems like it's trending towards him being available against Oklahoma, even though I'm not sure if they've made final determination on that one as of yet. There is at least optimism there that he'll be back.
And to backtrack a little bit with Mateer, obviously we'll get availability reports as the week goes on, Matt. But are we expecting this with Mateer to be like we're going to find out an hour before the game situation?
I would think when availability reports come out tomorrow night that probably questionable and will remain questionable throughout the course of the week. Obviously, it's our job to have a good feel for what's going on. So there's going to be digging just throughout the course of the week and see if you can get an idea of what the real story is there. But I could very much see this being a situation where they wait until later in the week, see how he's doing before making a final call on that.
Can I just add one thing about this entire John Mateer situation? I'm not saying whether or not he will play or won't play, but it does benefit Oklahoma for the question to linger.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Like I know we know that, but for people at home, like it definitely benefits Oklahoma for the question to linger as much as.
Can I throw out one thing though? I'm going to be disappointed if something doesn't happen. I've thrown this out already to you guys, and actually mentioned this on HQ Hid or along these lines earlier today. But first of all, I've never seen a surgeon get as much attention as Steven Shin has gotten in the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's like crazy just how he's become like this kind of like folk hero in Oklahoma. If John Mateer is actually out there, they need to have Steven Shin standing right next to him, running out of that tunnel next to John Mateer. I would just love to see the reaction from Oklahoma fans have Steven Shin out there with John Mateer actually playing.
Well, he would get cheered for the first 50 yards. The last 50, I don't know, the reception would be as warm as he crosses into the orange.
Yes. The other thing, Matt, about Iowa and Mark Gronowski. Reese Vanderzee, their receiver, what's the deal there? Because he had an injury that was supposed to sideline him a month, and it's been a month, and I haven't heard much about that.
I honestly, that's one that haven't done significant digging on recently, going back to when we originally reported on that when that happened, which was a freak type deal in terms of how that happened. But the expectation is that at that point was that it would be somewhere around a month that he would be out. So considering just the timeline of all of this, I would think that they would be in position to get Reese, who was their second leading wide receiver last year, back probably at some point soon. But I say that without having done any sort of extensive digging recently on that.
Gotcha. All righty. We're gonna take a quick break, and we come back. We're gonna finish out going inside the Insiders.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
This week, big time on CBS heads to Austin for Oregon and Indiana. Game of the week in college football between two top 10 teams. Me and John are both working sort of in parallel on Indiana pieces this week. I won't ruin mine or won't spoil mine. We're still in the process of reporting some of the stuff out. But some of it is about basically how they took last year's success and tried to leverage it to move forward. I think there was an understanding that maybe they weren't as far off as you might think. given what you saw on the field in the Notre Dame game last year. I think they felt they were a little bit more close at hand. But, we talk about this mythical term alignment. Whenever a coach gets hired, you're going to see it this December when coaches start to get hired. You're going to hear about alignment. But Indiana is a place where I think alignment is real from president on down. They have a relatively new president who used to be at Georgia, provost at Georgia, is literally from Alabama. She knows, Pam Whitten does, the impact of football. There's no secret about that. She came in and she kind of gave a directive to get football right. Scott Dolson, athletic director, has been at Indiana in various capacities for 30 years. He's a Bob Knight guy, started as a student manager there. Obviously, he's a basketball guy, but football for that team is almost a market inefficiency, not using it or not maximizing it, I should say. And basically, they got wind of Curt Cignetti during their hiring process, went and talked to 12 guys, but Cignetti was the one who got a very immediate recommendation to kind of push him up the list of candidates because of the bravado that he has, the swagger that he has. John, you're a guy who has sat with Sig. You have heard personally from him. You kind of know how he carries himself. He's turned the bravado down a little bit this year and has kind of let the team's play do the talking for him. And it's talking pretty loud given what they did a couple weeks ago at Illinois.
He's been very quiet this week, which I think has been interesting and purposeful. I saw Zenitz's eyebrows shoot up a little bit there. I'm sure he's thinking about what he said about the Illinois game afterwards.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you knew me well. No, wait, what that was.
Yeah, I know you. I remember him talking to me. He was like, I felt like coming in, taking over the program that I did, that I had to be that guy. Given what we did last year, I don't feel like I have to be that guy as much. It didn't want to talk much this week. We'll see if anything pops up, but didn't really want to do one-on-ones. It's pretty low key. I think in his press conference, didn't want to say anything wild, was very complimentary of Dan Lanning. But to your point, talking to him and defensive coordinator Bryant Haynes, like when they went back and watched Notre Dame game, Ohio State game, we all see the final score. It looks like they got blown out. The numbers showed they got blown out. But when they went back and watched it, I think we're not as far off as the scoreboard says we are. In that Notre Dame game, they gave up a 98-yard touchdown pretty early on in the first quarter, and it kind of rolls downhill from there. They didn't respond to some of those moments the way they should have. But, Haynes said, when we watch it, I don't think we're far off. I think we can beat Notre Dame's. I think we can beat Ohio State's, which this is the big test, for them against the Oregon team that is very good in a lot of ways. And I think to your point, Richard, about alignment, we've already talked about in this show about Cignetti and how he's going to be a hot candidate. When you think about why he could stay at Indiana, it's going to be because of alignment, because he trusts his AD and he trusts his president. They've given him the resources he's needed to stay there, to keep guys like Bryant Haynes, who's making more than $2 million a year. And I remember talking to Scott Dolson, AD, about it this offseason. He said, I think we're a perfect fit for him, and he thinks we're a perfect fit the other way around. So if that ultimately is why this thing rolls on for a while, I think that's going to be a big part. He knows what he has at Indiana. If they keep pouring in money, which I'm sure you'll talk about in your story, that could be how you keep this thing sustainable and going in, what's a pretty top-heavy Big Ten, but they can be at that top if they keep adding elite talent and compete the way they are on both sides of the ball right now.
We'll see if they end up having some competition, though, because if there are some other schools that could potentially open, if they're smart, Curt Cignetti, somebody that they should be looking into. And I don't know if we can cuss on here or not, so I'll just say, one of the things I love about Curt Cignetti, he has some legitimate SH star to him, but at the same time, to go along with that, he's a great coach, something that administrators love. He's been successful at more than just one school, has been successful everywhere that he's been. And you guys know the importance of talent identification. And I'm not just talking about the player part of it. I'm talking about the staffing component to go along with that. And he has done a hell of a job, whether it's the two coordinators, the strength and conditioning coach, Derek Owings, who is highly thought of enough that USC tried to hire him this past offseason before Indiana was able to ante up and find a way to keep him there. There are other assistants on staff that fall in that category. Front office perspective, that they had some respected guys in that world. He has just done a good job across the board in terms of the talent identification, having good pieces around him, both player-wise, coaching, front office-wise, the strength staff. And obviously, and it goes without saying, it was pretty damn important for them to get Fernando Mendoza this offseason to go along with that and completely change the outlook for them compared to what it would have been if they didn't get Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the staffing component, and that's something that I think is really key here too. They retained almost everybody from the staff last year. I believe Tino Sunseri is the only assistant coach who left off the staff last year to go to UCLA, and he is no longer there because he's been fired as the offensive coordinator there. Jerry Neuheisel in. We saw how that went on Saturday. What I think is interesting about Cignetti also is like he in an era of the GM, the empowered GM. Curt Cignetti is still extremely hands-on with that roster, given the players that are coming in, extremely hands-on with who gets offers, extremely hands-on with who is added to the roster. He's got an eye for talent, and it's an eye for talent that is focused on production. It's not necessarily projection. It's quite literally, we want guys who have produced at, could be G5 level, could be FCS level, doesn't matter. If you've produced, that's kind of a little bit the way that they lean with the players. Chris.
Can I just, in terms of the evaluation and kind of the portal, just something to think about, and this is something somebody brought up to me recently. When you're projecting ahead to the players Indiana thinks it can land, that has changed in the last 12 months. Like when you're thinking about the portal, the type of player they'll pursue, the type of player they think they can get, like they are shooting higher than ever before in terms of the high school recruiting. And also, like, frankly, like we all know how this works. Like people are talking this time of year about players that could potentially enter the portal.
What?
And,
That's
crazy. And I would say like Indiana's shooting higher than it did before. Like I think there's a real commitment in that program to winning at the highest level, and they are backing that up with their investment in the program, with their evaluations, and frankly with the product on the field. Like I mean, we all had Indiana in our top 10 this week, I'm sure, and that didn't feel weird. Last year it felt weird the whole year, and now Indiana's earned it. Like I don't think there's any question, and I think they're backing that up in every aspect of the program.
And let's not forget where Cignetti's background is. He was the recruiting coordinator for Nick Saban at Alabama. Like he believes, like you said, Richard, in being hands-on. I remember talking to him about it. I think he strongly believes in the value in personnel people and all that, but he kind of thought it was unbelievable when we were talking about the idea of giving all the power to a GM when it comes to who you go after, who you recruit, who you want to extend offers to. He's like, I have to be involved in those things. And that's very much a Nick Saban mentality. And he's kind of almost, and I wrote about it last year, but he's almost the forgotten Saban disciple because he took the long way, but he still has a lot of Saban in him. Of course, his dad was a great coach as well. He's an old school guy. He's got a huge chip on his shoulder. And I think that bodes very well for Indiana, even as they move up and feel normal in the top 10. Like they still, in some ways, don't think they like belong in some sense and very much belong in another sense. But I think that they're always going to have that chip on their shoulder, which leads to, guys wanting to play hard and doing as well as they have.
Matt talks about how Cignetti's got some SH star to him. I was talking to one of his former players, one of Cignetti's former players over the weekend, and he was like, yeah, man, like we'd be up 50 and you can't get this guy to crack a smile. Like it doesn't matter. He is all ball, y'all. It's really funny when you kind of get into it and you poke at who Curt Cignetti is. Elsewhere, big result on Saturday for the Florida Gators, who beat the Texas Longhorns somewhat surprisingly, I would say, in the way that the game went, when you consider that Florida, quite frankly, just beat Texas up in the trenches, especially with Florida's defensive line without its best player, Caleb Banks. They had some young players step up and some players who haven't really played this season yet due to injury step up, and they beat Texas up, really, especially Texas debuting a freshman left guard in that game. So Chris went inside Texas a little bit this week to kind of diagnose a little bit of what's going on. And frankly, and I agree with you on this, Chris, on Saturday at least, it wasn't Arch. I actually thought Arch battled. He hung pretty good, had some nice throws in the second half, but like when the guy's on the ground 6 times, I mean, it's really hard to win that way.
It's unbelievable timing of Matt to drop out there right as you say it wasn't Arch's fault. Unbelievable. Doesn't want to hear it.
I was going to say controversial take here. Arch Manning played well on Saturday, and it's not his fault. We dove into this on CBSSports.com. A little bit about what's gone wrong this season and also a little bit about what Texas could have done differently, because I think there's some very obvious ways that the results could change had Texas made a few decisions different the last couple of years, especially this offseason. But if you look at the data, like this is not all Arch Manning's fault. Yes, he holds the ball longer than almost any quarterback in the country, but a lot of that's because he's running for his life. And there are just like little things there that just raise your eyebrows when you consider the stats. For example, no P4 starter has thrown a smaller percentage of throws from 1 to 9 yards. Like there just aren't easy throws on his plate schematically, which is really interesting because that's what Quinn Ewers lived on last year. Was those like short RPO, like
Chris,
quick action.
I will say this, Chris. He was missing some of those throws quite badly, especially in the
No question. And I think Texas has adjusted the scheme. And I know Texas adjusted the scheme to fit what Arch does better, which sometimes it's coming out of play action, back to the defense, being able to read things, pushing the ball downfield. Like Texas, he's throwing the ball downfield more than almost any other passer at the P4 as well. And that is the element of Arch Manning that you can't defend, right? He is missing some easy throws, but Texas also ranks 105th in yards before contact. The offensive line isn't clearing space. Texas ranks 121st nationally in yards after contact. Running backs aren't creating plays after first contact. Arch Manning's the team's leading rusher. And I think the most damning side of all is Texas ranks 128th in pressure rate allowed. There are only 136 teams in the FBS, and Texas is 128th. And I don't really care if it's Peyton Manning back there or Arch Manning back there. You're not going to find success in that situation, in that scenario. And I really just go back to the offseason. Like Texas knew this could be a potential issue along the offensive line. I know for a fact Texas tried to drop about a $2 million bag on an offensive tackle at the portal deadline, trying to get somebody to go in the portal and address that issue at tackle. It didn't happen. Texas tried on a couple of receivers. Matt knows this as well. For different reasons, it didn't work out. Eric Singleton's at Auburn because Auburn essentially outbid them. Zachariah Branch at Georgia because Texas didn't want to take Zion Branch. But there were opportunities for Texas to improve the pieces around Arch Manning, and it didn't happen. And it's disingenuous to say like this is just like the roster construction's fault, or this is just the offensive line fault, or this is just the receiver's fault. Because like, yes, Arch Manning is missing throws, but the narrative that's out there and the easy narrative of just making fun of Arch Manning because he's Arch Manning, I think is really unfair when you consider how this has played out this season.
How it's going to play out on Saturday, brother, we'll see, because Brent Venables is going to bring it. And they better be able to figure it out. And I will say Oklahoma's going to bring it up front, I think, decidedly differently than Florida did. Florida was sort of more like mano-y-mano, line it up and whip your tail. Brent Venables is going to bring stuff besides R. Mason Thomas, who very much is just going to mano-y-mano beat your behind. But they're going to bring stunts. They're going to bring twists. They're going to bring blitzes from a lot of different places. They're going to damn the torpedoes and bring cover 0, 7-man pressures, and say, Arch, beat it or don't. So it's going to be a question about how Texas's front can handle it and keep Arch clean, and how Arch decides to decipher and solve problems up front, given that I think they're going to have protection issues because of how good Oklahoma is up front on the defensive line.
That's also just it's a better Oklahoma secondary than Florida has as well. Like, not to dismiss what Oklahoma did, but you're totally right, Richard. If you look at like blitz rate, like Oklahoma's 13th nationally, and I think Florida's like 127th. Like Florida never blitzes, and Oklahoma does it all the time. It's a much different challenge. And Texas is going to have to figure out a way to establish a running game. Like Trey Wisner came back last week. I think a lot of people around that program thought if you get Trey Wisner back, it kind of covers up for a lot of the issues they've had at running back. I think it was 14 yards on 11 carries on Saturday. Like he could do nothing.
Yeah, and then some of that they got game scripted out of, but yeah, he was not effective.
Well, and I mean, I'm not turning this into like a Texas podcast, but I think a lot of Texas fans would know that like Steve Sarkisian, especially when he gets behind or gets uncomfortable, like defaults to the pass and gets away from the run. And it wasn't working on Saturday, so you understand that. But Texas has to figure out a way to establish the run and help out Arch Manning in that passing attack. Otherwise, I think they could have a lot of the same issues because the offensive line, like, clearly is not holding up in pass protection this year.
Yeah. So we'll see where Texas goes from here. Where we're going from here, we're getting out of here. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday edition of the College Football Insiders. I'm your host, Richard Johnson, Chris Hummer, Matt Zenitz, John Talty. Thank you, and we'll see you on Thursday.